The day Ijoma finally said yes to another man, her dead husband walked through the gate. Not a ghost, not a dream, not the kind of thing you blink away and it's gone. Chukwuebuka, the man who vanished without a word 7 years ago, stood at the entrance of her own wedding compound in a white agbada, calm as a man returning from the market. And the worst part? He was smiling. If you've never seen a room full of people go completely silent, not the polite kind of silence, but the kind where even the high life band stops mid-song and the talking drummer forgets what his hands are supposed to do, then you've never witnessed what happened in the village of Umunachi on that Saturday afternoon. And if you want to know every single thing that happened next, stay right here, because this story, it doesn't go where you think it's going. Not even close. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button, because we tell stories here that will shake something loose in your chest that you didn't even know was sitting there. Let's go back. 7 years back, to be exact. Ijoma Obiechina was 26 when she married Chukwuebuka Nwosu. She was the kind of woman people described as too fine for her own good. Not because of arrogance, but because of presence. She walked into a room and the air rearranged itself. She had studied economics at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. She had plans. She had ambitions. She kept rolled up tight in her chest like a blueprint, waiting for the right land to build on. Chukwuebuka was everything her parents approved of. He was the first son of the Nwosu family, educated, soft-spoken, with a quiet kind of wealth that didn't announce itself. He ran a logistics company in Lagos. He drove a clean Toyota Land Cruiser. He prayed before meals and remembered her mother's birthday before she did. On paper, he was perfect. And for the first 3 years, it felt perfect. But Ijoma had one persistent worry she kept folded underneath her happiness like a hidden seam in an expensive dress. Chukwuebuka was closed. Not cruel, not unkind, closed. There were rooms in him he never opened, phone calls he took in the car alone, travel trips that stretched longer than announced, silences that settled over him like fog and cleared without explanation. She told herself this was just the nature of a serious man. She told herself she was overthinking. She told herself, and here is where it started, that she should trust her husband. Then the chef arrived. His name was Ibiagili Maduka, but everyone called him Obi. He was 29, stocky, with the kind of face that laughed easily and the kind of hands that could turn 3 ingredients into a reason to stay at the table. Chukwuebuka hired him from a small catering company in Enugu as their live-in private chef. He said it was a gift to Ijoma, so she wouldn't have to cook after long days at the consultancy firm where she had recently started working. Ijoma didn't think much of it. Obi moved into the boys' quarters behind their duplex in Lagos with a duffel bag, 2 pots he brought himself because he said he didn't trust other people's pots, and a habit of humming old Igbo folk songs while he cooked. She found the humming annoying at first. Then she found it comforting. Then she stopped noticing it, which is the most dangerous point with any comfort. When you stop noticing it, it means it has become part of the air you breathe. The disappearance happened on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday, no fight the night before, no cold shoulders at breakfast. Chukwuebuka kissed her on the cheek, told her he had a meeting in Abuja, and left with 1 travel bag. She waved from the door, the gate closed, and that was the last time she saw her husband for 7 years. For the first week, she thought it was delayed communication, bad network, a busy stretch of meetings. By the second week, she had called every number she had for him, his personal line, his office line, 2 lines that rang and no one answered. She drove to his office in Victoria Island. The receptionist, a young girl who could not look Ijoma in the eye, said Mr. Nwosu had been unavailable. When Ijoma pushed further, the girl said quietly that Mr. Nwosu had not been to the office in 12 days. 12 days! Ijoma had thought it was only 7. She called his family in Imo State. His mother, a woman who had always looked at Ijoma with a mixture of approval and strategic calculation, told her very calmly that she did not know where her son was. Then she added something that Ijoma will replay in her mind for the next 7 years. My daughter, pray. Just pray. As if she already knew there was nothing to find. Obi stayed. That was the first thing people noticed and talked about. Obi, the private chef, did not leave when the husband vanished. He stayed in the boys' quarters, he kept cooking, and Ijoma, too shattered to make any practical decisions, did not ask him to leave. She ate the food he brought to her door on a tray when she could barely get up. She did not taste it, but she ate it. Her family came. Her mother arrived with a prayer group of 12 women who slept in the parlor for a week. Her father filed a police report that went nowhere, which is the kind of sentence that sounds small but carries enormous weight if you have ever tried to file a missing persons report in Nigeria and watch the officer write it down with the care of someone filling out a grocery list. The Nwosu family was less visible. They came once, a delegation. 2 uncles and Chukwuebuka's eldest sister, Adal Bioma, sat in the parlor with tight faces and said they would handle it. They did not handle it. They handled Ijoma's questions by not answering them. 3 months passed, then 6, then a year. The marriage hung in legal suspension. There was no body, no death certificate, no divorce. Ijoma existed in the strange in-between of a woman who was married to no one. The pressure started quietly and built the way pressure always does, gradually, then all at once. Go back to your father's house. Start your life again. A woman cannot carry an empty name forever. Her aunties were not cruel about it. They were practical in the way older women in Igbo communities can be practical, with love sharpened into something that cuts. Ijoma refused. She went back to work instead. She threw herself into the consultancy with the single-mindedness of someone using productivity as a life raft. She got promoted once, then again. She bought her mother a new shop in Umunachi. She rebuilt, slowly, painfully, and entirely on her own terms. And Obi stayed. He had become more than a chef by year 2. He had become the person who noticed when she hadn't eaten, who fixed the generator when it refused, who sat with her on the veranda on evenings when the weight of everything got too heavy, and who never, not once, tried to fill the silence with uncomfortable advice. By year 3, she stopped calling him the chef in her head. She started calling him Obi. By year 4, she noticed the way he laughed. By year 5, she noticed that she looked forward to dinner, not because of the food. By year 6, she told herself she was imagining things. She was a married woman. Even if the marriage was a ghost, it was still her ghost to carry. Then, year 7 came, and everything changed. The change didn't announce itself as love. It announced itself as a conversation at 2 in the morning. Ijoma had woken up from a nightmare, the recurring one where Chukwuebuka came back, but his face was blurred like a photograph left in rain. She'd gone to the kitchen for water and found Obi already there, sitting at the island with a cup of tea, not asleep, just there. She sat down across from him and asked, without planning to, "Did you know, before he left, did you know he was going to leave?" The silence that followed was 3 seconds long, but those 3 seconds changed everything, because Obi didn't say no immediately. He looked at his cup first, and Ijoma, who had spent 7 years learning to read silence, heard everything in those 3 seconds that he hadn't said. "Obi, Ijoma, tell me." And he did. The night before Chukwuebuka left, Obi had overheard a phone call, not snooping. The kitchen window was open, Chukwuebuka was on the veranda below, and voices carry. What Obi heard was a man speaking to a woman, not in a romantic way, in a way that sounded like a plan. Words like by Tuesday, and the transfer is ready, and she won't know until it's too late. Obi had told himself it was business. He had told himself it was not his place. He had told himself many things that night and in the years that followed. But here, at 2 a.m, with Ijeoma looking at him with eyes that already knew the answer, he could not tell himself those things anymore. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know for certain, and because he stopped. Because what, Obi? Because I was afraid of what it would do to you if I was right. Pause here, because this is where the story changes shape. Because here is what Ijeoma did not do. She did not scream, she did not throw the cup. She sat with what she just learned for a long time, the kitchen humming around them. And then she said, I need to know who the woman is. And Obi, because he had spent 7 years carrying this, because he had researched it on his own in the quiet hours when Ijeoma was asleep and the house was still, said, I already found out. If you're still with this story and it's hitting something inside you, do yourself a favor, subscribe. Because what Obi pulled out of his phone that night changed everything Ijeoma thought she knew about her marriage, her husband, and the man sitting across from her in the kitchen. The woman's name was Neka. She lived in the UK, Peckham, South London to be specific. She had 3 children. The oldest was 9 years old. Ijeoma did the math before Obi finished the sentence. Chukwuebuka had not disappeared. He had relocated. He had spent 2 years quietly and methodically liquidating his Lagos business and moving assets. The logistics company had been sold, the property in Victoria Island was in a different name, the account Ijeoma had access to, the joint ones, had been deliberately left with just enough in them to keep her from destitution, but not enough to make her dangerous. He had constructed an exit strategy so careful, so long in the making, that Ijeoma realized the man she thought she knew had been living a parallel life possibly before they were married. The prayer, the Toyota Land Cruiser, the kissing on the cheek before Abuja, all of it set against this other truth. She didn't cry that night. The tears came later. The night they came in a way that frightened her, not because of sadness, but because she realized she was not crying for Chukwuebuka. She was crying for the version of herself that had waited, the 26-year-old who had waved from the door and believed the gate closing was just Tuesday. Obi was there for that too. He did not try to fix it. He sat beside her on the floor of the corridor. She had slid down against the wall and he had simply joined her, and he let it be what it was. A woman grieving a marriage that was a lie inside a truth she loved completely. 3 months after that night in the kitchen, he told her he loved her. He did not do it dramatically. He said it the way he said everything important, directly, softly, and without performance. He said he had loved her since year 2 and spent every year since then being exactly what she needed him to be and nothing more, because the alternative was to be selfish and she had already been cheated of enough. Ijeoma did not answer him that night. She thought about it for 2 months. She consulted no one, which was unlike her. Some decisions are private enough that they must be made alone. Then she said yes. Not to a grand gesture, to a Tuesday morning conversation over breakfast. She simply looked at him and said, I want to marry you, Obi. And he looked back and said, I've been ready. They planned a traditional wedding in Umunachi. Her family, after the initial shock and a series of meetings that lasted 3 full weekends, gave their blessing. Her mother, the same woman who had arrived with 12 prayer warriors 7 years, was the one who said, that man never left you. He just didn't arrive when we expected him. Obi's family came from Anambra State. They were loud and warm and brought 2 tubers of yam for every family they visited. The bride price was negotiated over palm wine and it went smoothly, which in Igbo tradition means everyone left with their pride intact and no one pretended that wasn't a small miracle. The wedding was set for the last Saturday of October. 2 days before the wedding, Ijeoma got a text from a number she didn't recognize. It said, I am coming home. Do not do anything you cannot undo. See. She stared at the message for 10 minutes. Then she called Obi. She read it to him. His response was quiet and setting. "What do you want to do?" She said, "I want to get married on Saturday." And so, on Saturday morning, Ijoma dressed in her ivory and gold asoke, while her aunties argued gently about the correct angle of the gele. The compound was full. Borrowed chairs, a generator humming behind the mango tree, the smell of jollof rice and pepper soup in every corner of the air. The traditional ceremony had just completed the kola nut blessing. Obi had handed her the cup and she had drunk from it. The crowd was cheering, the kind of cheer that old compounds absorb and give back warmer. And then the gate opened. Silence. The talking drummer stopped. The high life band stopped. Even the children who had been chasing themselves between the chairs froze in place as if someone had paused a video. Chukwemeka Nosu walked in wearing white agbada, calm, unreadable, smiling. Not the smile of a man who understood what he had interrupted. The smile of a man who had decided somewhere on whatever flight had carried him home that his arrival was the answer to a question nobody had been asking anymore. He looked at Ijoma. She looked at him. The whole compound held its breath. And here is where every story you have ever heard would give you something loud, a collapse, a scream, a dramatic confrontation with pointing fingers and ancestors invoked. What actually happened was quieter and more devastating. Ijeoma stood up. She smoothened her wrapper. She walked toward him, not with anger, not with tears, and she stopped 2 feet in front of the man she had waited for, prayed for, grieved for, and eventually buried in her heart to survive. She said, "You got my message." Chukwemeka blinked. "What message?" "The one I sent 3 weeks ago through Ada Obioma. I told her to tell you that I was getting married. I wanted you to know." The compound was still silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. The kind that happens when people realize the woman they thought was the victim has been 10 steps ahead this entire time. Ijeoma had known he might come. She had invited the confrontation on her own terms, on her own ground, in front of her own people, because she was done letting Chukwemeka Noso happen to her. This time, she had chosen the stage. She said, "You have a wife in Peckham and children. I know about NECA. I know about the liquidated accounts. I know about all of it, Chukwemeka. I've known for over a year." Something moved across his face. The smile shifted, became smaller, less certain. "Ijeoma," she said, "I am not angry." And the terrifying thing was that she meant it. "I was angry for a long time. I was so angry I used to stand in the shower and scream while no one could hear me. But I am not angry anymore." She paused. "I pity you. You had a good thing, and you chose fear over honesty. You chose a secret over a partner. And the saddest part is that whatever you were running from, whatever you couldn't tell me, you could have told me. I would have stayed. I always stayed." The compound was breathing now, slowly, together. "But I am done staying for you," she said. "I am starting a different kind of staying today, with a man who never left." She turned back toward where Obi was standing. He had not moved. He had not stepped forward to confront or posture. He stood exactly where the ceremony had left him, steady, present, waiting. Ijeoma walked back to him. Chukwemeka did not move for a long moment. His sister, Ada Obioma, who had been sitting at the family table, put her face in her hands. One of his uncles stood up, then sat back down, then stood up again and guided Chukwemeka firmly toward a chair at the edge of the compound. Because what was there to do? The kola nut had been broken. The cup had been drunk. In the tradition of their people, the agreement had already been sealed. Ijeoma Obiechina was already a wife, just not his. The celebrations resumed, slowly at first, then with the kind of energy that comes when a crowd has survived something together and decided that joy is the correct response. The High Life Band found their rhythm again. The talking drummer came back twice as loud. Children resumed chasing each other between the chairs. Chukwuemeka sat at the edge of the compound for 45 minutes. Then quietly, he left through the same gate he had entered. No one stopped him. No one needed to. In the months that followed, Ijeoma completed the legal dissolution of her first marriage, something her lawyer had already been quietly preparing since the discovery of Nneka and the Peckham children. It moved faster than expected. Chukwuemeka, to his credit, did not contest it. His family never fully recovered from the shame of that Saturday. Ada Obioma called Ijeoma once, 3 months later, to apologize. She said she had suspected something was wrong even years before the disappearance. She said she had chosen her brother over the truth and that it was the worst decision she had ever made. Ijeoma listened. She thanked her. She did not promise forgiveness because forgiveness is not something you can promise before it arrives. But she left the door slightly open because that is the kind of woman she had chosen to become. Obi opened a small restaurant in the market town nearest to Manachi. It became famous within a year, not because of any campaign or promotion, but because food made with love has a way of spreading its own news. The jollof rice became the thing people drove 40 minutes for. He named the restaurant Ijeoma's Kitchen, which made her laugh the first time she saw the sign and cry the second time. They had a son the following year. They named him Chukwuemeka, which means God has done great things, because that is what it had felt like. People asked Ijeoma for years afterwards, how did you do it? How did you survive 7 years of uncertainty and come out the other side without bitterness hollowing you out? And she always gave the same answer. She said, I survived because I stopped waiting to be rescued and started building instead. And I was never alone, even when I thought I was. She would pause then, and whoever was asking could see the particular softness that crossed her face when she thought of something specific. Then she'd say, and because someone stayed, someone I didn't even know to look for because I was still looking at the gate. Here is the part of this story that stays with you. Chukwuemeka thought he was the main character. He thought his return would be the turning point, the grand gesture, the dramatic re-entry, the man coming back to reclaim what was his. And instead, he walked into a wedding that had already happened, in a compound that had already moved on, and discovered something that nobody had told him because there was no reason to. The story had continued without him. Obi was never the backup. He was never the consolation. He was the person who chose to stay every single day for 7 years without asking for anything in return. And there is something in that, in the choosing of daily, unglamorous, faithful presence over dramatic entrances, that says something true about love that the songs and the movies never quite get right. Love is not always the person who arrives in a white agbada through the gate. Sometimes, love is the person already in the kitchen, humming an old Igbo song with your food warm on the stove. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something in that place where the big questions about loyalty and waiting and starting over live, subscribe to this channel. Because this is what we do here. We tell the stories that don't get told the loud way. The ones that happen in compounds and kitchens and corridors at 2 in the morning. The ones that are real enough to be fiction and true enough to be life. Subscribe, share this with someone who needed to hear that starting over is not giving up, and come back because the next story we have, it will sit with you just as long.